Hello. Um, I have been trying to record this video for a really long time today. It's like, it's about to be 1 in the morning, and this is like the only time I really have to record. Um, I'd been busy with my other job, like that I had mentioned in my other video, um, and it's been good, but exhausting. Um, the exhaustion will always kind of come with having two jobs and trying to fit everything else in. And so it's kind of forced me to really find time to, set aside to record these things and do in a way that I think is, helpful and productive and, in a way that I like. Um, and right now that's 1 in the morning in my car. And I'm only doing it right now because I can sleep in tomorrow because I'm off. Uh, but anyway, I hope you're doing well. I have tried to record this multiple times, and each time I'm getting further than the last, but there's always a point where I feel like I'm talking too much about the wrong thing, or I'm not staying focused. And I know that I want these videos to be very stream of consciousness and be messy inherently, but I don't know. I want them to be a little more focused, and I'm realizing that what I wanted to talk about today was actually from a subscriber of mine who had commented on a previous video asking if I could talk about grief. Um, because they were going through that, and I had been thinking about it since I had seen the comment, and I only then and then am now realizing, having been trying to record this video multiple times, is that I feel like I'm really, you don't want to say uncomfortable with grief, but it is clearly something that I have struggles talking about. Um, and I think a lot of it has to do with just how often I've been around death, and loss in my life. Um, and so I hope me talking about my personal experiences with it help, and I'm going to try to really cultivate something out of that that's coherent, hopefully. Um, but grief is tough. It's difficult. It's arguably one of the most difficult feelings that we ever have to experience in this life. You know what I mean? Um, not just are we losing somebody that means so much to us, but there's a whole emotional fallout and recovery period that takes place after the fact that you may not even know is taking place when it happens, but it takes a lot out of you. And sometimes you don't really realize that until you are out of it. You know, I think in my own life that when I lost my grandpa on my dad's side, I ended up dropping out of college like the first semester in, you know. Um, it had happened maybe like 2 or 3 months into me actually being at university and being excited to be like start a new chapter in my life, and all of that just came crumbling down when I found out he passed away. And I didn't realize in the moment that it was happening, but I was depressed. I would only get out of my dorm to go eat and to sleep, and that was it. I would just do nothing else but lay in bed. I ended up failing a lot of my classes because I just did not have the motivation anymore after learning that my grandpa was gone. And I was like 4 or so hours away from my hometown, and I didn't have a car, so it was literally just something I had to bear, him being gone. Um, I've been in so many different places around with death. I was there the night my abuelita, which was my like great grandma, when she passed away in her bed at her apartment. I remember waking up and hearing my mom cry as she held her hand because cancer had taken her and she looked nothing like she used to. And I've been there with my great grandfather on my mom's side where, he's laying in bed in a hospice facility, and we're having to say our goodbyes because he can't hear us. And then just having to sit with that and not realizing it takes a lot out of you, you know? And I think, I don't know how to say it. Despite it being a lot and it taking a lot out of you, it's not a feeling that I think deserves to be repressed or forgotten. And I think I've spent a lot of my life really trying to do that because it's just an uncomfortable thing to feel. It's a difficult thing to feel. The loss of a person, you know what I mean? And I think in a world that we're living in today, especially, even more so now, is that we are in an age of distraction where we don't want to sit with that feeling, and we really don't have to, you know, with all the technology that we have and all the sort of distractions that we have as a byproduct of that, we can isolate ourselves into our own bubble to never really have to experience that sort of thing again. You know what I mean? Or at least to the fullest extent. You know, there's a way to numb it, however that may look. And I think it's just become something very uncomfortable, and it's something that I don't want to necessarily look at it as uncomfortable. You know what I mean? It's something that I try to look more now as ceremonial. Doesn't feel like the right word, but something similar to that. You know what I mean? Or celebratory. It's something to value the person that we had in our lives, you know what I mean? The impact that they had on us, the memories that we carry because of them, you know, the parts of us that are changed because of having known that person. I think it's so much easier to focus on what it has taken rather than celebrating what we had gotten from knowing this person and having our lives intertwine with these people, you know? And I think that's a lot easier said than done to do, but it's just, I don't know, it's silly almost in a way, like comedic, how often it feels like death follows my family and I. When we moved back to LA and we were looking for apartments, the one we're currently, you know, at now, it's really nice and great, but we were right across the street from an end of life care facility, and I wish that was like a bit or me being hyperbolic, but literally as I'm talking right now, that I can see the ambulance lights in the parking lot because they're there to take a person who just passed away, and that's crazy to think about. You know what I mean? I think death. I don't know if this is gonna make sense, but I feel like because of the internet and the culture that we're living in here, at least in America, it's become so normalized death that it's more, it's just numbers. It's a statistic. We don't look at this as like, this is a loss of life. These were people who had entire worlds, hopes, dreams, ambitions within them, and it's gone now. It's over. And whether that is because of natural causes, old age, whatever it may be, or because their life was cut short, I feel like the whole world treats it so flippantly. You know, we don't value that life is such a gift, and having these people that we get to connect with in our lives, whatever role they may play, you know, for however long, them being there changes you just inherently. Having known the people in your life that you've lost, knowing them changed you in some fundamental way, whether or not you may realize it, they have. You know, your life is all the different because you've met that person or were born into the family that you were born into and had the relatives that you did, you know. And I think so often we let the world, life, distract us from that, you know. And I don't think it's necessarily all our fault. I think it's just the way things are. You know what I mean? I think about the amount of times I've spent in funeral homes with my parents as they try to figure out and negotiate pricing with the funeral director of how much this funeral is going to cost, you know, being in group chats with family members of them, you know, really going back and forth about, well, who's going to pay for this, or how are we going to afford to pay for the casket, and what are we going to have to sacrifice, because they're charging extra for personalized music. And it's like death has become an industry, and it's desensitized us to really sit with this feeling and recognize that, like, this, we lost somebody, and it's difficult. And at some level there's a way that you might say that you might never recover from losing that person, and you might not, but I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing entirely. I think it's a privilege, and honestly it's a beauty to love someone, to know somebody, and have them be so intertwined with you that losing them means it's losing a part of who you are, losing a part of yourself. And I think that's deeply, it's deeply human. It's what makes us us. It's only in death that we're really allowed to celebrate the multitude of a person, you know? Um, I don't know if that made sense exactly, that last part, but I do think that we have become desensitized to death and not really understanding how to properly handle it. We get caught up in too many things. Um, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this. It's been like 12 minutes. I'm sorry. Um, I don't know if there's anything to glean from this other than me just really, really, in the truest sense of the word, yapping about grief, and what it's affected, like, with me. But it's a complicated feeling, and truly and honestly, like, I think Andrew Garfield himself said it best, is that it's all grief is just unexpressed love, you know. And I think it is a privilege just to love somebody as deeply as you can and feel the weight of how good that might feel, and then the opposite of that, loss and feeling immense grief, like world shattering grief. And as strange as it may seem, I think it is also a very big blessing that we can feel that so deeply too, you know. I even think of that John Green quote of, it hurts because it mattered, you know. And I think it's a blessing to feel pain and feel sorrow and sadness over other people, you know. It's just a part of being alive, and that might not always be something easy to contend with, but I at the very least think that the more we get accustomed to embracing it and sitting with that feeling and knowing that this isn't a bad feeling to feel, it is just unexpressed love, not knowing where to put that. Like, almost as if your heart's overflowing and you just don't know what to do with the contents. And the only thing I could say is that you use that feeling of loss, of grief, to simply push you, I don't want to say to do better, but to keep living and to do your best, that knowing you carry those memories of that person inside you. You carry that part of you, you know. Just as much as you lose a part of you when that person goes, all the memories, all the love that they gave you, it is still carried with you, you know. And I think that what you gain from it far outweighs what you end up losing. Um, and I often think we just look at what we lose, and it's hard not to. But the human experience is so vast and complicated that I don't think we need to entirely keep looking at this thing as like something to avoid or something to numb ourselves to. Um, I think it is something we need to keep continuing to embrace and celebrate, you know. As morbid as this might sound, my sister always tells me about how when it comes time for her funeral, she's like, I don't want sad music and I don't want you guys coming, to the funeral home depressed and weepy. She goes, I want you guys to have like a DJ set. I want you to come dressed in your best clothes that you feel most comfortable in and have a good time and remember me as being funny. Um, tell jokes that I said, tell stories that made, me laugh and others laugh. Like, celebrate that I was alive, that I lived. And I really do like that. I think we need to start celebrating the lives we live. I had just gotten a notification from my phone saying there was no more storage. So I had to delete some stuff to make more room. And I think that is a good point for me to stop yapping because I feel like I've been rambling more so than I've been coherent. Um, so I do apologize if this was not what you were hoping for or expecting. I hope there is something to glean from all this, but yeah, it definitely was not what I expected, especially being like this, or it being this difficult for me to talk about. I really didn't think it would be this difficult, but I guess it's just another thing that I've got to work through. So I'm kind of grateful that this video was able to let me do that. But in any case, I hope you're well. I hope you take care of yourself. And I hope you know that as heavy as grief can feel, I very much do believe it is still a very beautiful feeling for us to experience in this life. And all I think it takes is just looking at it from a different perspective to see that grief just means it mattered and that person meant a lot to you. And I think it's something worth holding on to and not trying to avoid entirely, you know what I mean? I think even in grief, it can teach us a lot about ourselves and the ones we love. So, yeah, I will see you next time, and I hope you take care of yourself.